Hello, this is my module that I redesigned slash created for a unit that we work on in kindergarten. So, since our curriculum is so well mapped out, I decided to use this opportunity to adjust the resource in order to create something that would fill in the gaps that I have noticed that would make this more accessible for our students. So I used Skills 4, which focuses on introducing letter sounds. And for the purpose of this module, I focused on a week, which is about 3 lessons in this case, including time for pausing points. One of the challenges with CKLA is that it moves very quickly. It starts off very slow at the beginning and then moves quickly for students with needs. And so it needed a simplified version that students could really practice. Sometimes students learn a letter each day, and then they go through a period of time where they review all the letters they learned. This gives students 3 instructional days to learn a letter, as well as build upon and practice other letter sounds with the remaining days in the week to continue that. The curriculum is well designed as far as the introduction and the resources. So I took some liberties in designing resources that were beneficial for students with different needs and needs of variation, and are also a lot shorter. The activities that are included in the skills workbook are extremely beneficial, however, not necessary in making sure that the students have exposure. It's that additional practice, which is necessary for some students and cumbersome for others. So this redesign focuses on making this curriculum and these activities accessible for all students, keeping in mind the duration of the activities, as well as the amount of information that they are supposed to consume, as well as focusing on the assessments, really assessing what you want them to. So, due to the fact that kindergartners, especially in Skills 4 puts us right in the peak of fall, so think October with our current pacing, don't have the ability to read and follow a lot of instructions. The classroom is serving, and I think I can show you, the classroom is just serving as a home for the curriculum. Not necessarily there. You can see it's added, and they can click into it from the classroom. With their goals for the week listed, however, I wanted to share the resource because they will be unable to do a lot of the reading of the text. So, if I find my slides here, we start off with identification of their goals. I recorded audio for each slide and would love for you to take a listen as to how this would be presented, just due to the fact that kindergartners do not have the independence to read or follow pictures when being introduced with sounds. CKLA resources could obviously be supplemented, however, due to copyright and accessibility over the summer for some of those resources, I used a few of the activities but created a lot of my own using the web tools. So the goals for Skills 4, particularly on day 1 or 4.1, are to identify the sounds in a given word, specifically focusing on the number, focusing on producing the N sound. We don't use letter names until about the halfway point through the year because we don't use them to read. So we'll never say the letter N to students. We will say the picture of the sound N or the N sound. I'm not sure if the microphone correctly picks that up, but and then we're working towards identifying the difference between the N and M sound, introducing minimal pairs, which again is just briefly touched because we just want them to be able to hear the difference. So after a clear identification of slides, I have the instructions recorded, and this is a drawing tool so that you are able to edit. So the students would do cat, and they know from previous units that it should be k, at, and there's some motions that go along, and so I would circle the number 3. Same with b, at, bat, and mat. Now this warm-up is supposed to be used as the formative assessment. The same same pictures are given daily so that students can track their progress throughout the week, as well as I can track their progress. So if they understand it from the beginning of the week, great. And if they continue to understand it and we are not confusing them, great. However, if they make progress and understand counting sounds better, then I would be able to note that as well when they do this warm-up every day. So this warm-up, I give instruction and I say the animal names. However, I do not, and you can access them by this tab and pressing play. But I don't tell them or segment the words for them. I simply say cat, how many sounds do you hear, bat, as their formative assessment. Using it as warm-up because that's a skill that they've done in previous units, but focusing on these specific ones. This is the warm-up that we will go over with them. The warm-ups for CKLA are 10 to 15 words long, so reducing it to 6 is significantly beneficial. In this one, I do segment in the recording g, o, and I tell them g, o, that's 2 sounds, and they have the ability to circle, and it repeats for the rest of the items, and then I show them the answers on the next slide as well, so they have more independence if a teacher is not there to facilitate. Then we have the new sounds. I go through and pronounce them, as you can see right here. It is recorded, which is awesome. And we practice correct pronunciation and give them time to practice back. This is when they have the opportunity to draw again. There's recorded directions. They can place a check mark if they do hear the n sound, like in net. So they would take their marker and they could do a green check. And if they don't hear it, like in fish, they could do a red X. The use of visuals as well as words, as well as the auditory directions, makes this extremely accessible to students. And then we even show the answers because, again, this is a guided practice activity. The non-guided practice, the independent practice for the day, is matching. So I want to match the check mark and the necklace because they both have the n sound. And I have the hat, so I'm going to match those in the matching game as well. Again, the use of pictures makes it a lot better than writing and reading. Continue on to the second step, or the second lesson of the module. This is where we'll really get to the difference between that n and sound, not just focusing on one in isolation. And again, it's recorded for students' benefit. Again, repeating this same activity that they did on day 1 with no further direction, used as a formative assessment to track their progress, primarily because these are activities that they should have done and should be familiar with, and then reviewing these, differentiating on this slide between 1 and 2 sounds, like in bow would be 2, b, o, so students could circle the number 2, and at is 3, and it goes on. It's again reviewed for students. New sounds, it's the same pictures so they can practice consistency at the beginning and the end. The created aspects of this are obviously a warm-up daily, our creative activities using the web tool. I'm using Nearpod for those activities, as well as minimal pairs. Here I've recorded and practiced saying them, and they will get to again on another creative activity. And this is reviewed, so it is a guided practice as well with newspaper, marker, and neck. Clear pictures, again, they're able to self-assess and check meeting the needs. And again, they review by the matching game so that you can click through. It tracks their progress. It saves it for me with the account that they use. Moving on to 3. Again, this was a 3-day module because CKLA likes to embed time for guided practice, and normally after 2-3 days you would want to introduce a new letter, but for the purpose of this module we wanted to just focus on 1 to explain the pacing for students. This day is when we squeeze in some assessments as well as the formation. Last day for this formative assessment, so it really switches to summative, but due to the fact that I can see their answers, I can help them adjust and figure out which students to pinpoint. For the second half of the warm-up, in which I still review and reveal the answers. However, this is done live with the recording and not in a separate slide. Again, reviewing the sounds daily, activities again that I created. In CKLA, you simply say the words and have the students repeat after. So providing that visual, especially for students that can't verbalize back, is extremely important and also helpful for student comprehension, including even the ML population. Verbal pathways. CKLA has a lot of videos that I cannot access due to copyright. However, I recorded audio and then gave them the tracing sheet with the visual directions so they can practice tracing. This is not an assessed skill for this module. However, the introduction goes hand in hand with it. Again, providing the opportunity to trace, and again, making this accessible for students with these words that are a little longer, because again, we're not necessarily needing them to be able to apply all of these reading skills, but we want them to focus on letter formation and hearing and understanding the n sound. And moving to the final activity, we have matching. And the idea is that even though these are words, this would be challenging for some of our students with different abilities. However, if they can look at the picture of the net, they can hear, okay, that word has n at the beginning, and then recognize either the medial sound or the ending sound. And this is a good tracker too to see. The other activities really allow to look at the beginning sound. This looks at their ability to count sounds as well as identify specific sounds. So through this activity and this module, I created the various assessments using Nearpod, the opportunities for tracing and drawing, as well as the games as a Web 2.0 tool, met the needs of diverse learners in various ways, adjusted the pacing to fit student needs with the opportunity for additional practice, but just making sure that we are keeping direct instruction simple and straight to the point. I used formative and summative assessments daily and how I would access that. It is housed in Google Classroom. Google Classroom is something that I love as a storage opportunity, but would like to work more with being more accessible for our littles, and especially considering this module at a later point in the year. So I am super excited that we got the opportunity to practice this. This is something that I do think would be super helpful. I know that we want to maintain the curriculum the way it is written, but this is a supplemental resource that I think some of my friends with various needs might benefit from. So I'm glad I got the opportunity to play around with it and see what it was like to create it.